Ladies, what's the weirdest fetish a guy has dropped on you all of a sudden with little to no warning? Were you with it or against it? Story 1. Not sure if this counts, but I worked as a pro dominatrix for a couple of years, and my ex-girlfriend and I would often do duos together, as it was a nice way of spending time together and making money, and we had great chemistry together as doms. Years later, she's still a dear friend. She hits me up letting me know that she has a really well-off client who has a very specific breath play fetish. Since I was very experienced with breath play and felt very comfortable doing it safely, she asked if I'd be down to make a couple $100. I get to the dungeon where we smoke lettuce and wait for the guy. He comes in with a bunch of rolls of plastic. Turns out he had a very specific fetish for this kind of plastic that was very smooth and soft. It wasn't only a breath play suffocation scene, but he wanted to be totally mummified in said plastic. I'd say he was in his late 50s, early 60s. Just looked like someone's dad. We spent 2 hours binding him in this plastic, putting plastic over his face until he'd scream his muffled safe word, as he'd gasp for air, and then sitting on his mummified metapod-looking body and smoke lettuce on top of him, tickle him, and then ignore him and talk amongst ourselves. It all looked like something straight out of a Dexter scene. And honestly, it would probably look very creepy to an outsider. This cycle of mummifying him and suffocating him lasted for 2 hours, until he asked if we could cut him free. Then he jerked off for like 1 minute and blew his load all over the pile of plastic. Weirdly enough, nicest and most normal clients I've had. During our aftercare session, this is where you encourage your sub, tell them how well they did, cuddle them, and check in with them so they're not traumatized by the scene. He spilled his guts to us. He said he felt out of control in his life, and having his breath controlled and wrapped in the plastic made him feel safe and comforted him. I'm not sure if this one counts as getting something dropped on you all of a sudden. This person was expecting some kind of fetish to take place. I think it doesn't occur to many of us that some people have these what we call fetishes for specific reasons. This person seems really self-aware of what it is that really gets him going and why. It's good that he knows it. I think it kind of sucks that he has to be kind of well off to be able to be well adjusted by indulging in this and paying for all the supplies. An interesting read and a good start to the video. Story 2. I was seeing this guy for a couple of months. At this point, we were exclusive and sleeping together, but weren't much more serious than that. One time we're getting hot and heavy. He's about a millimeter from actually penetrating me when he stops where he's at and asks me, "Do you trust me?" I wasn't sure what that meant, so I asked him exactly that. "What do you mean?" He wouldn't explain. He just kept repeating, "Do you trust me?" Eventually, I sort of snapped at him and said, "I mean, we're literally about to have spicy time, so yeah, I guess so. Why?" Without answering, he just opened his palm, slapped across the face, hard. I kicked him out of my house and our relationship dissolved shortly thereafter. The kicker? While we were getting to know each other, he told me his ex was into some really rough stuff and that he hated it. And that, kids, is called projection. Edit. No shame for having kinks, provided everyone involved is healthy and consenting and legal. And please, don't spring kinks on your partner. And definitely don't actively lie about yours if you ever want to try it in the future. Yeah, I think in this video we're going to deal a lot with people who spring things unexpectedly. Intimacy in a lot of things is all about communication. This person definitely didn't communicate. Asking, "Do you trust me?" is not good enough. You have to have a talk with your partner about this stuff. And if part of what turns you on means the other partner has to be unaware, I think you really need to rethink why that happens, because that's not fair to anyone. Story 3. So this actually happened to my best friend Drew, who is a male, but it's worth sharing. He was fooling around with this girl he had met, and he could not get her off. They played countless times, and he would try anything he could to get her off, but he couldn't do it. She claimed the spicy time was great and never mentioned anything to make it better for her. So finally, he just asks if there's anything he can do to get her off. And she says she has a kink, but it scares everyone off. He asks what it is and explains that he isn't most guys and he'll do whatever. And she asks, "Would you be willing to take a poop on me? I'm kind of weird, but there's something really spicy about having a guy treat me like garbage." My buddy was finally convinced to do said act and propped over her midsection and lays a huge steamer right on her breasts and stomach region as she plays with herself. To this day, he says he never heard any girl finish harder than when this turd made landfall on her. We later found out that Drew was not the first person we know she asked to dump on her. Several people we know told us they have been solicited, but only Drew made her dreams come true, I guess. I think the telling part is not just about the act itself, but the fact that it makes her feel like garbage. Again, there should be a lot of discussion about this. This one, they talked about it. And it wasn't the guy's kind of thing, but he was willing to make it happen for the girl. I'm glad she had her dreams come true. Wouldn't be my dreams. For me, I couldn't get past the smell. Story 4. I've been dating this man for 2 years that I met on Plenty of Fish. About 6 months in, he told me he had a balloon fetish. He said he had been jacking off with them since he was a teen, and his fantasy was to have actual spicy time on one. He said he had always been afraid to tell anyone, but he sensed that I would be the type of person who wouldn't run away. At first I was like, oh my gosh. But then I was like, hell with it. What's the harm in trying something new? So he brings out this huge 6-foot-long balloon that he has to blow up with an air pump. The thing is huge, and he tells me he owns a ton of them, all shapes and sizes. At first it was weird trying to straddle that humongous balloon and leaning over so he could do me doggy style on it, all the while being terrified that it was going to pop in my face at any given moment. But I got used to it, and we do it often. It has popped in my face quite a few times, and we both get a good laugh. I figure if it makes him happy, then why not? Also, if anybody has any suggestions on new things to try with the balloons, let me know. Story 5. Knife stuff. No warning at all. I knew he was kinky and slightly weird, but not like dangerously weird, until he was having difficulty reaching climax. I said something along the lines of, "How can I help you finish?" And he slid a fake magician's knife out of the nightstand next to him and said he had a stabbing fetish. Wanted me to pretend to be murdered by him. It was a nuclear red flag, but there I was. He's already inside me, so I'm like, whatever, I'll go along with this. He finishes. I left. The next day, my abdomen was totally beat the hell up. Bruises all over my torso and chest from him jamming a stupid plastic knife into me. It opened my eyes to how spicy stabbing scenes are in horror films, as he explained that's where the fetish began. From growing up watching stuff like Halloween. Never again, though. Ugh. Story 6. I recently broke my hand and it's currently in a cast. I posted a photo of me and the cast on my knitting business Instagram, small following, almost all women. I got the normal likes from people I interacted with, but some weird likes and new follows from guys as well. One commented asking how bad the break was. I got messages like, "How did you injure yourself?" and "How many fingers are in the cast?" and "Can I sign the cast?" I pulled up a couple of profiles to see what sort of accounts these guys follow, and yep, lots of casts. That's the day I learned that cast fetishes are a thing. That's also the day I learned to be very careful with my hashtags. Edit to add. Even though you've all given me great ideas, the hashtags I used were not so creative. In fact, I went back and checked, and the only cast-related hashtag I used was broken hand. The reasoning behind this one would be curious. Is the injury a part of it? It's kind of interesting that an injury or a wound would have to be part of it. Or is it just the cast thing? Is it that something has to be bound? Is it sort of like being tied up, kind of a bondage type thing? That I could kind of understand. I wonder what it is that drives this kind of a fetish. Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of this video, and have a wonderful day. Story 7. There was this one guy who was really into having a free household, meaning, I guess, spicy time and nudity in front of the children. He was kind of vague about what he was suggesting, so I kept on trying to steer things back into the realm of sanity and be all, yeah, spicy times, nakedness, once the kids are in bed, but then he went into this elaborate fantasy about me showering with our teenage daughter. Not actually ours, this was still in the realm of fantasy. And I was like, wait, you're actually getting off on the idea of the kids being involved? Or at least witnessing all of this? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, I'm out. I don't have a ton of limits, but kids are one. He also kept calling me mommy, even after I asked him to stop. I actually have a child who is still young enough to call me mommy. If there's one guaranteed way to turn me off, that would be it. If I recall, he also referred to his equipment as his F-stick. That would be a hard no. Story 8. Not me, but a friend of mine was talking to this guy who said, "Before we go any further, I need to come clean about something. Please don't think I'm strange. I've got a really weird fetish." Instantly, we think it's going to be something extreme, maybe involving bodily fluids. I don't want to kink shame, but just something downright gross. He says, I need to be wearing a fleece. Patagonia was his preference. It's like innocent compared to the ones in this thread, but just bizarre. Story 9. Several years ago, I was talking to this guy on OkCupid. We hadn't even met yet, and he asked me if I'd be okay with erotic hypnosis. I was like, what? And he sent me a book. However, then he tells me that his last girlfriend and he had gotten into this elaborate fantasy role play and somehow decided that they were actually hypnotizing each other. And one night, she convinced him that she was not real and left him sobbing in a corner. And he wanted to keep doing that. Nope, 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 nope. Yeah, there are some things people have seen about hypnosis. I think there's something that deals with control. I can understand that part. But this tragic turn the story takes at the end is kind of unusual. Again, don't want to kink shame anyone here, but where is the fun in being left alone in a corner being convinced someone is missing? This is the literal definition of there's a lot to unpack here. Story 10. Was talking to a guy online on a dating site. One of those guys that seemed kind of too good to be true. Out of my league, good looking, great job, owned his own home. Traveled nationally and internationally once a year on vacation. I figured there had to be a catch. He had a cuckold fetish. I'll give him this. At least he was honest about it early on rather than waiting until I was invested in a relationship. He was also very polite about it when I declined. Story 11. My best friend told me about how she had been dating this guy for a few months and they took a camping trip together. They were having spicy time in the tent and he puts his forearm down on her neck and starts cutting off her air supply. She freaked and thought he was going to unalive her, to later find out he had a choking fetish he never told her about. Edit. Since more than one person has asked, no, the relationship did not last. Story 12. He wanted to paint my toenails, then finish on them. I was down as long as I approved the color. He did a great job. Even put little hearts on the big toes and gave me a foot rub. It didn't do much for me passion-wise, but I got a pedicure and we had fun. Edit. He did wait for the polish to dry first. There was some dirty talk, though mostly I just wiggled my toes at him. It made him laugh and turned him on. It was fun. This is another one of those that is on the milder side. I think like me, you did feel a sigh of relief when she said he did wait for the paint to dry, or polish to dry, excuse me. This is almost mainstream. Foot fetishes seem to be a thing. This is just an offshoot of that. Story 13. Guy here, but this one confused the hell out of me. I started dating this girl, and at first things were normal, but she started picking fights with me and then having angry, spicy time. It got to the point that she literally refused to have spicy time without a loud shouting match first. It was really hard to break up with her because when I told her we were through, she thought it was foreplay. Eventually, I had to just ghost her. Story 14. Not me, but a friend told me a story about one of her Tinder dates. Fairly boring, non-spicy first date convo. She gets up to go to the bathroom, and as soon as she sits back down, dude is like, so how do you feel about pee play? Like, would you pee on me? I guess her going to the bathroom was enough of a segue for this guy. Story 15. Not me, but I heard a story from a friend one time who got with this guy one night, and he said, I like being a little rough. Are you okay with that? She, without thinking much of it, decides to play along, and the dude slaps the hell out of her and says, you like that shrew? She noped out real quick. Communicate, people. If I've said it once, I've said it a bunch of times. Communicate. Rough stuff can mean a whole bunch of things. For this one, you almost need a contract like that 50 Shades of Grey dude. Communicate. Talk things out before you spring things on people. Story 16. Was seeing a lawyer while I was in college, and he was into equipment shaming and a chastity cage. I really liked him, so I indulged him some. Kept his little equipment cage keys on my keyring, the whole shebang, but he could not separate fetish and life, so our whole relationship turned into fetish instead of an actual relationship. Story 17. I was walking to my college, and on the way I saw a couple walking in front of me. I was late for my class, and when I rushed past them, I heard the girl say, I knew you were into weird fetishes, but the most I'll do is pee on somebody. Don't even want to know what the boy said. Story 18. My first partner was very experienced and knew what he wanted. Early into our physical relationship, he told me that he wanted me to slap him and tell him how he was a bad person. It was difficult for me to get on board with that. I'm a very nice person. What could I even say? See, that's why this one is different from the earlier one with the guy who said he likes rough stuff. This guy clearly knows what he wants, knows specifically what he wants, and was able to communicate that with this girl. And maybe I'm wrong, but this girl never actually said no. She just said it was difficult to get on board. I think this person got a lot of response on exactly exactly what to say. Story 19. I was dating a guy who confided in me, after I confided in him some of my more ethically ambiguous fantasies, that he wanted us to have daughters and raise them to be our passion toys. No, thank you, Adam. Story 20. One guy wanted me to berate his small equipment and tell him how worthless it was. I didn't want to do it because I have mad equipment respect, but I did because I also believe in embracing your kinks. Story 21. Guy told me he likes tall women. Really tall women. Wanted me to dress up and play at being a giantess. We were halfway through our first cup of coffee. I'm all for communication, but there's a time and a place. I'm glad that you're open. I'm glad that you know what you like, but maybe wait until at least the third cup of coffee to spring this kind of thing on someone. Story 22. My boyfriend likes people to watch him pee. Not peeing on people or things, just peeing in the toilet normally. It's weird, but honestly, I'm weird. That's it? That's not exactly a fetish for a lot of people. For many relationships, that's just a fact of life. That's getting used to each other living together. That's more an annoyance for some people sharing a bathroom than others. Story 23. I had a friend who told me some Tinder dude brought a backpack of fetish gear to their first date and was surprised that she found it weird. Story 24. He was into blood play and wanted to make little cuts all over my body with a really pretty knife. Yeah, no thanks. Story 25. I once met a guy on Tinder who, out of nowhere, asked me if I could do his dog while he watched. I was very, very against it. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.